There is a strange thing that happens in long relationships. The relationship stops working. Both people can feel it. The conversations are shorter. The laughter comes less often. There is more silence, and not the comfortable kind. Something that used to feel alive now feels like a routine you are both going through. And yet, nobody leaves. This is not a story about people who are confused. Most of the time, they are not confused at all. Deep down, they know. What keeps them there is not love exactly, or at least not love for the person standing in front of them. What keeps them there is something quieter and far more powerful. It is the story of who they were together, the story of what the relationship meant, the story that they have been telling themselves quietly for years. This essay is about that story, where it comes from, what it does, why it is so hard to let go of, and what psychology actually says about why smart, self-aware people stay in situations they know are not working. Most people in long relationships live in two worlds at once. The first world is the past. It is full of real memories. The early days when everything felt exciting. The first time you felt truly understood by another person. The trips, the inside jokes, the moments that felt like they meant something. These are not made-up feelings. They happened. The past is real. The second world is the present. And the present looks very different. Conversations feel like they are checking boxes. Arguments happen over small things. The closeness that used to feel natural now has to be forced. You share a space. You share a calendar. But the connection, the thing that made it feel special, is gone, or at least very hard to find. Here is what makes this so complicated. Both worlds are real. The past happened. The love was genuine. The good years were actually good. A person is not lying to themselves when they remember that. And that is exactly why leaving feels so wrong. It feels like you are calling something a lie that was not a lie. So people stay. They stay because they believe the past is evidence that the present can get better. They stay because they cannot separate the story from the person. They stay because leaving feels like throwing something away that still has value. What most people do not realize is that this is not just an emotional response. It is also a psychological one, and it has a name. In the 1980s, a psychologist named Dan McAdams began studying something that sounds simple, but turns out to be deeply important. He studied the way people use stories to understand themselves. His research found that human beings do not experience their lives the way a camera records video, event by event, moment by moment, without meaning. Instead, people turn their experiences into stories. They find patterns. They create characters. They give things a beginning, a middle, and a direction. They do this automatically without thinking about it. This process is called narrative identity. It is how people answer the question, who am I? And one of the biggest chapters in most people's stories is their most important relationship. A long relationship does not just become a memory. It becomes part of your identity. It becomes part of how you explain yourself to yourself. I am someone who loved deeply. I am someone who chose this person. I am someone whose life went in this direction because of this relationship. When that relationship ends, it is not just a breakup. It is a rewrite. A major character exits the story. The direction you thought you were going in changes. The version of yourself that existed inside that relationship, the one who was a partner, a teammate, a person in a specific kind of love story, that version has to be grieved too. That is a much harder thing than most people expect, and it is a big reason why people delay it for as long as possible. There is another psychological trap at work here. Economists call it the sunk cost fallacy. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. A sunk cost is something you have already spent, time, money, energy that you cannot get back. The fallacy is when people let that spent resource affect decisions about the future even when it should not. Here is a simple example. You buy a movie ticket. The first 20 minutes are terrible. Do you leave or stay? Most people stay, not because they are enjoying it, but because they already paid. Leaving feels like wasting the money, even though the money is already gone either way. In relationships, this runs much deeper. The longer a relationship lasts, the more it costs. In time, emotional energy, shared history, and future plans. The more you have invested, the harder it becomes to accept that it may not work out. Leaving does not just mean losing the present. It feels like it erases the meaning of everything already put in. Researchers at the University of Rochester found that people with longer relationship histories reported greater difficulty leaving, regardless of current relationship quality. The investment itself, independent of how things were going, was a factor in staying. The story amplifies this. Because the story is the container for all that investment, the bigger the story, the more painful it is to accept an ending that does not match what you imagined. There is one more thing working against clear thinking here, and it is the way human memory actually works. Most people believe memory is like a recording. Something happens, your brain stores it, and later you play it back. That is not how memory works. Memory is reconstructive. Every time you remember something, your brain is not playing it back, it is rebuilding it. In that process, it adds meaning, softens difficult parts, and adjusts the emotional tone. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus spent decades studying this and found that memory is far more changeable than people think. Details get filled in. Emotions shift. The story gets cleaned up over time. In relationships, this means the version of the past you carry is almost always better than the past actually was. Good moments shine brighter. Hard moments fade. The early days feel more magical in memory than they did in real time. No present can compete with a past that has been quietly improved over years. The present is messy. The remembered past was warmer, closer, more alive. So people stay, partly because they are chasing a version of the relationship that memory itself has made better than it ever was. Here is where things get especially interesting and especially hard. Over time, it is possible to become more attached to the narrative of a relationship than to the actual person you are in it with. This sounds strange, but it makes sense. People change. The person someone fell in love with 5 or 10 years ago is not exactly the same person they are today. Both people have shifted. Some versions of the two of them worked well together. Some did not. What stays constant is the story, the origin, the early chapter, the version of the relationship that felt most alive. Researchers at the Gottman Institute, which has studied thousands of couples over several decades, noted a specific pattern in struggling relationships. Couples would talk about each other in past tense, even when describing the present. They remembered positive things about the history, but struggled to name things they currently valued about their partner. This is the gap between the story and the person. The story is fixed and meaningful. The person keeps being a real, changing human being. When that gap grows wide enough, the relationship is essentially being held together by a memory of itself. Staying in a relationship because of its story rather than its present reality is not without cost. Research on what psychologists call opportunity cost awareness suggests that people in unfulfilling long-term relationships often narrow their decision-making over time. They make choices about career, location, friendships, and growth that protect the relationship, even when the relationship is not giving much back. There is also the cost to self-perception. When a person stays in a situation that does not match what they know to be true, they spend daily psychological energy managing that gap. Researchers call this cognitive dissonance. Over time, it quietly erodes both confidence and clarity. And then there is the simplest cost of all. Time spent in a present that is not working is also time not spent building something that could. None of this means leaving is always the right answer. Some relationships go through long, hard periods and find their way back. What matters is the honest question. Is this difficulty temporary and workable? Or is it the quiet, steady signal that something fundamental has shifted?